So the recording has started. If anybody is unable to make it or wants to watch the recording back, it's going to be posted on our website after today's meeting. Everybody is going to be muted for the duration of today's meeting. And if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the chat and we'll take questions at the very end of the meeting. So with all those regulations aside, I'm going to hand things over to Jean McKay to get us started.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jean McKay, the Deputy Director here at the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor, and I'm so grateful that you were able to join us this morning and appreciate your interest in the grants program. I'm standing in for our Executive Director, Bob Radliff, who is on jury duty this week. So he sends his warm regards, and we're really excited to be able to offer this grant program again in collaboration with the New York State Canal Corporation. And next year, as you know, is a big year along the canal. It's our bicentennial year. So it's sort of like a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to really take advantage of the bicentennial and to shine with events, with tourism related projects, and to look forward, I think, to the years ahead and say, what do we need? What do we need to do to be better, to better serve the people who are coming to enjoy the canal? So we appreciate your partnership in that. And we're excited to see what kinds of projects you have in the pipeline, what kind of ideas for events you have planned. We moved the grant program timeline up. Usually, as you may know, we offer the grant sort of in January and February, the applications are due, but we moved to the fall for this year because we really wanted, particularly for events, for people to be able to plan ahead and for us to know what events are going to be on tap in 2025. We're already getting calls from media and reporters and travel writers saying, what's going on for the bicentennial? We want to be part of it. So we didn't want to wait until May to be able to announce projects for 2025. So I'll be back on in a little bit to talk about the tourism infrastructure part of the program. But I want to turn it over to Sasha Del Perro from the New York State Canal Corporation to offer her greetings.
Great. Thank you, Jean, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and for your interest in this program. Like Jean said, we're very excited to see what ideas and projects you have in the pipeline that you're thinking about. Just a little background, the New York State Canal Corporation is responsible for operating, maintaining, and improving and promoting New York State's canal system. So that's 524 miles of canalways and 150 miles of trailways that we maintain and manage ourselves. This partnership program is an opportunity between us and Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor to offer competitive grant funding to support tourism and recreation along the canal system, and to offer communities a way to pursue events and capital improvement projects. The program prioritizes infrastructure and amenity improvements that boost tourism and events that commemorate the canal's 20th anniversary or expand the audience of canal users served. Funding is open to counties, municipalities, units of local government, not-for-profit organizations, and federally recognized Native American tribes. And as Jean mentioned, this year we've kind of moved the time frame for the grant program up in order to accommodate especially events that are looking to tap into the energy of the bicentennial. So the grant has opened on October 7th, and the application process will close November 15th, with awards being announced at the beginning of the year. And just for a little background, the Tourism Infrastructure Grant is intended to capture small improvements that would traditionally fall below the threshold of the Canal Corporation's existing grant program called the Canalway Grant Program, that's administered, that is run through the state's CFA process. That grant has a minimum funding amount of $25,000 and a maximum of $150,000. But that program has to be a capital improvement project. So this grant program, in terms of the tourism infrastructure, we wanted to be able to capture smaller projects that maybe are capital improvements, but also allow funding to be used for purchasing equipment or paying for contracted services and smaller restorative projects. And so we understand that small projects can have a big impact on communities. So this is an opportunity. I don't want to call it a small grants program because it has big impact, but the idea here is that we can help fund those projects with this grant program. And then for the events and festivals, the program focuses on supporting public events and festivals that encourage the exploration and enjoyment of the cultural, natural, and recreational offerings of the Canal Corridor. And we also want to focus this year on being accessible to people of different backgrounds, ages, and abilities. As a whole, applications for both programs need to demonstrate how they will achieve one or more of the program objectives. And the program objectives are identified in the program guides, which are available on the grant program webpage, but I'll run through them quickly. Those objectives are to facilitate recreation and/or tourism on the canal, enhance visitor amenities and/or improve the visitor experience, encourage overnight stays, commemorate the history, heritage, or culture of the canals, make recreation and tourism assets more accessible for people with and without disabilities, and expand the audiences served, improve and/or promote connectivity between recreational areas and communities, or between waterway and land trail. Again, the grants guideline document is provided on the webpage, and please take a look at this document as it's changed slightly from the prior grant round. I had a few questions come in about eligibility. Some eligibility requirements have changed. So again, don't use the guide from last year or years prior. Two general items I want to point out that have changed from the grant guideline and also our objectives is this year's grant guideline offers a resource page at the bottom. It includes design guidelines and recommendations for best practices. Information on each of those resources is provided, so like how they would apply their application. And if you have any questions, please email the program manager and we will get back to you about where those resources are applicable. And then secondly, this round, we're placing additional emphasis on events and projects that take steps to be inclusive and accessible to those with disabilities. Resources for best practices and design standards are provided again in that resource page. And additional points will be provided to applications that meet those standards. Applicants that do not meet those standards will not be docked points. There's just additional point values added to applicants who do. And finally, I just want to note that I've mentioned this in past years, but if you're new to this information session, the Canal Corporation has put all of our sponsorship money into this grant program for events. So if you're planning an event, make sure that you go through this grant process. If you are funding or if you're planning a conference, conferences aren't eligible through this grant program. So you can still come to the Canal Corporation or Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor looking for sponsorship. We do still have funding available, not through a competitive process. You need to submit a proposal to us. And then secondly, we also have our On the Canals recreation program, which offers funding to support programs on the canals, mostly recreation programs, and private businesses are eligible. So if you have any questions about either of these programs or offerings, reach out to me at Canal Corporation and I will get you in touch with the appropriate person. So I've spoken enough and now I'm going to pass it over to Ashley, who will cover the event grant program. Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha. So just to expand a little bit on what Sasha's already touched on for the event grants program, in terms of the program goals and eligibility, we're really looking for events and festivals that encourage the exploration and enjoyment of the canal system. So events that take place both on the canal, but also that celebrate the canal as a system. So that could include events that are system-wide celebrations that focus on the waterway and trail, events that focus on heritage and culture, and specifically the Erie Canal's bicentennial. So as Jean and Sasha both mentioned, we have a big year coming up next year for the bicentennial. So we'll really be looking for community events that help celebrate that major milestone. Recreational events, especially ones that encourage paddling, cycling, walking, hiking on the trail and the waterway, and those that support the Canalway Challenge and the First Mile Challenge. That being said, we're also looking for events that actively include or serve people of all ages and abilities. So that focus on the canal is a great asset for accessible recreation and invite a wide and diverse audience to the canal. Also things that focus on performance-based art like theater or music qualify. So things like concerts and stuff like that. And lastly, events that promote the canal as a unique linear asset and encourage overnight stays. So think, events that take place over a week or a weekend, or that may cross into different regions of the canal system. So to get into some technical pieces of this grants program, all events hosts will be responsible for obtaining the proper permits and insurances for their events. And that would include obtaining a permit for from the New York State Canal Corporation for events that are happening on their land. So we'll kind of take a look at how the application addresses this need in just a minute. But the events awards will also be required to recognize the New York State Canal Corporation and Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor for their sponsorship. And you'll also be required to complete a final report within 30 days of the completion of your event, or by October 30th, whichever comes first. And that report will require you to demonstrate your use of funds awarded and how you are matching those funds. So what I mean by match is every dollar that you're awarded through this grants program must be matched dollar for dollar. So that can come from other sources of funding, but we can also use in-kind and volunteer hours as your match. And there's a lot more detail about that in the program guide. So exactly what qualifies for match. So as Sasha mentioned, I highly encourage everybody to read the program guide in detail before starting your application. So that being said, what I'd like to do now is to share my screen and walk everybody through the application process and take a look at what the application looks like together. And as a reminder too, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we will make sure to answer them at the end of today's meeting after everybody is done going through their portion of today's call. So let me just pop open the application. So this is what the application looks like once you log in. You should be able to access this screen from the grants page of the website. And if you've applied before, this will look very familiar. If you forgot your login credentials from years prior, there's a way to go in and reset your password. So just follow the prompts if you forgot your password. But if you have applied previously and you're using the same email address, it will require that you log back in. So once you are logged in, this is what you'll see. There's a link to the grant guidelines here, as well as on the application or the grants page of our website. And then as you scroll down, you'll see the ability to start an application for tourism, infrastructure, amenities, or events. Once you have applied, you'll see your application show up down here under My Applications. If you have one for each category, it'll show both of your applications there. So today I'm going to walk you through events, and then Jean will walk through tourism, infrastructure, and amenities after. So we're going to start an application for events. You're going to first name your application. It'd be great if we could focus on naming the application with your organization name and your event name, but I know everyone's going to have something a little different. So just coming up with that application name. On the second tab, you're going to put in your applicant information. So this is going to be all information that's focused around your organization. So it's not necessarily specific to your event, but we'd like for you to tell us a little bit more about your organization. So we're going to answer those questions here. Um, and then as you scroll down, you'll see a section for legally authorized representative. So this is going to be the person that you want to show up on your contract, and that who has the ability to sign contracts and legal documents. So that might be the same person as your main point of contact, and that might be a different person. In a lot of cases it is. So we wanted to make that distinguishment there. That's the same as last year, if you have applied in the past. So then on the last tab of the application is where you're going to input information that's specific to your event. So a lot of this is pretty straightforward: your amount requested, your event name. For the event website, we recognize that there's going to be a lot of people or in a lot of events that aren't advertised on the website yet, but it would be great if everybody could input the event URL that gets you closest to where the event will be posted. So maybe that's just your organization website. Maybe that's your events calendar of your website or your blog, wherever it's going to be posted, and wherever you're going to drive website traffic to learn more about your event. That's as close as you can get would be great. All of our events are required to have a web URL by the spring. So that way we can promote all of the events, especially with the upcoming bicentennial. There's going to be a lot of people looking for events. Erie Canalway is also going to be hosting an official bicentennial event calendar on our website. So we're going to be driving a lot of traffic there. So make sure that you have your event up on your website and you have plans to put it up on your website. Scrolling down, we ask for an event summary. Later on in the application, you'll be asked to also put in a promotional description. And these two things are different. So your event summary is going to be used for internal purposes only. This is what you would like our grant reviewers and our grant scorers to know about your event. And the promotional description is what we will use on our events calendar to promote your event to the public and to share information about your upcoming event for the year. For your event dates, you have the option to, choose my event takes place on one day in one location only. If you have multiple dates or multiple locations for your event, you're going to select that second option and you'll be prompted to answer. There's going to be a grid that shows up that will provide you some space to give more details about dates, date ranges, locations, so that we can be as specific as possible when we're mentioning your event in promotions. One thing that's new for this year is the event location URL. So what we want everyone to do is basically drop a pin on Google Maps and then share that pin with us in a URL so we can see exactly where your event will take place. And the reason that we're doing this is so that the New York State Canal Corporation is aware of which events are happening on their land and require permits, but it also gives them an idea of where events will be taking place on certain dates and times so that their staff and their team on the ground can be aware as well. So I'm going to walk you through what that looks like because I know that might be a new concept to a lot of people. So if you follow the instructions here, it gives you a step-by-step breakdown of what you need to do. So the first thing would be to go to maps.google.com. So I have that pulled up right here. I'm going to type in Peebles Island because that's where the Erie Canalway offices are. And so it drops the pin right there. That's not the exact location of where we are. I'm going to put a pin right there. And then I'm going to hit this button right here for share. When you do that, this pop-up will happen and there'll be a link to share. You're going to hit copy link. I will copy the link to your clipboard on your computer and you're just going to paste that right into this event location URL. So it's pretty simple. Like I said, there's steps that make it pretty straightforward. But if anybody has questions on that, obviously you can reach out to Bob, Sasha, or myself. Following that, there's going to be questions about your uses of awarded funds, your event budget, and your sources of matching funds. The estimated total cost of event, we'd like everybody to please include the total cost of the event, which would include the estimated volunteer time and any matching sources that you have. So that would include things like in-kind services as well. So you're going to use estimated values for those included in the total cost of your event. So what that means is that your total cost of your event should be at least double what you're requesting from this grants program. So if you're asking for $1,000 to fund your event, the estimated total cost of your event should be minimum $2,000 because you're including the $1,000 you're asking from us plus the $1,000 that you'll be using as match. Then we're going to ask that you list your sources of matching funds. That's so that we can ensure that you'll be able to meet your match at the end of at the conclusion of the event. And then we ask a couple questions about goals, estimated attendance, and it continues from there. One thing that we are asking for is how your event will support and invite people with disabilities or how your event will be accessible to people with disabilities or invite people from underserved audiences to your event. We're asking that you just be specific about that. We also have a guide that you can reference that's included in the application. And in addition to that, it's also listed in the resources section of the program guide, which Sasha mentioned before. So with that, the last thing is that we ask everyone to upload a W-9. If you fail to upload a completed W-9, then we may not consider your application. So make sure that W-9 is completely filled out and it's up to date. So with that, I am going to hand things over to Jean to talk us through the tourism infrastructure amenities side.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. All right, take a break, take a breather, because that was a lot of information about events, right? And now you get more information on the infrastructure side. The good thing is that some of the information that Ashley just shared is relevant on the infrastructure part as well. So this part of the grants program is really geared in, as we said, to capital improvements. So it can be anything that you need to make your site more tourism ready, tourism accessible, more attractive. So I want to start by just saying to you, put on into your head, like you want to think like a tourist. Someone is coming to visit the site. They may be from another state. They may be from the next town over. So when they come to your community or your site, think about, what do they see? What do they need? What are they seeing that maybe doesn't look good? Or are they finding the kinds of things on your property that they need to find? And so being in that mindset and even putting that kind of thinking into your application, I think can really help you to decide, this is a really strong tourism project. This is how my project is going to impact the visitors that are coming here. So it could be that you need improvements to an amenity. Maybe you need to upgrade your bathroom, or you want to beautify a part of your property with flowers or gardens, or maybe you need some new equipment to maintain your property. Those are all things that are covered in this part of the program. Signage is also included, so you may want to have better signage to get people from one part of your site to another, or that you want to explain something about the canal. That's another thing that we would cover. There may be enhancements that you want to make to specific canal-related infrastructure, like historic infrastructure. So if it's an older lock that you're maintaining and you need to have a weed whacker or fix it up, those are some of the things. And so right on the page, the main page of the tourism infrastructure grants, it'll talk about those program categories. You can also count up to 10% of your grant award for project management. So that's an important thing for you to have in there. That may be something you want to use as part of your match or not. And the grants can range from 5,000 to 24,000. All right. Ashley, why don't we look at the application and we'll just go through that, and that will kind of explain some of the other things that I think we're looking for. Okay, so similar to what Ashley just showed you for the event side, you'll be putting in your legal name, a description of your organization and your project title. And then we'd like to know more of like who owns the property and like who are you? Are you a county, village, you're a nonprofit, and so on. One of the things that we find is really important when you're putting in infrastructure type projects is the idea of who owns the property and who's going to be responsible for maintaining it in the long term. So a number of the questions that we ask for have to do with that. That comes into play if your project is on Canal Corp land. The Canal Corporation needs to know who's responsible for maintaining things, not just next year, but 10 years from now. And so most of the first part is just pretty straightforward, you know, of name and mailing address and that kind of information. So then let's go to the application questions themselves. There's project summary, and I would encourage you to just be concise here. This is where you want to think like a juror of someone who's reviewing your application, and they're also reviewing 30 other applications. And so in that project summary, you want them to get it in a couple of sentences that this is what you want to do. Make it easy for them to say, oh, this is X project, it's at such and such site. Got it. Then later on, you can describe your project in greater detail. So you'll be checking off the kind of activity that you're applying for. So Ashley, can you scroll down a little bit more? Okay, great. And then there's some permitting that we need to know about and that you may have to apply for permits. So there's seeker permits, and those are for environmental quality review. If you have a project that's already in the works, you may already have a permit, and you can tell us that. And you may be subject to historic preservation review as well. Then you'll describe your project, and you'll see in the project description, you get up to 3,000 characters. That doesn't mean you need to take all of them. We don't review based on quantity of information. We really are reviewing based on quality of the information. So again, try to be concise and just sort of make sure that you've answered the question. So if there's parts A and B, like in the description, how will it add long-term value? Or B, how will it attract and benefit current and future users? Try to answer, you know, both aspects of the question. And then Ashley, you can just keep scrolling down here for the other questions. So it's pretty straightforward, you know, what's the project? How will it be maintained? Again, we're asking about accessibility here. And I just want to share the perspective that I think one of our goals in the Canal Corporation, when we look at the big picture of the canal corridor, we really do want it to be a place where everyone can come and enjoy. And when we say accessibility, it's not just people with disabilities, it's people of all ages. A lot of our users are 55 and older. A lot of people need, you know, some level of support. So again, when we're just wanting to raise awareness about this and have everyone thinking about, well, how can we just take the next step to make things a little more accessible, a little bit easier? So this year, you know, maybe you'll read the accessibility universal design principles. Maybe there's something in there that you can be thinking about and highlighting. Maybe there'll be some nuggets that you'll say, oh, I see where my site isn't quite where it needs to be. Can't address all of that in this grant, but maybe there's some work to be done in future years. So use it as a learning opportunity to look at your site and be thinking about how we can all do a better job there. Same with underrepresented audiences. You know, a lot of times we think, well, it's here, so anybody can come, but that's not always the case. So just we might want to think about who's in your neighborhood. Are they coming to use your site? How can we make it more, you know, just more inviting to all kinds of people? And then you want to make sure that your project is consistent with local and county plans. And so if you have information about that, please put that in there. You may have already hired an engineer for the project. If you have, we want to know about that. So some projects are when people apply are more in the concept stage, and others are really much further along. So we are looking at a whole gamut of things. One doesn't necessarily get scored more highly than another, but we want to make sure that you've thought through the various aspects of a project from kind of soup to nuts. Ashley, is there a way we can keep going? But I want to go to the budget. So this is where you're going to put your location in again. Same as before. One thing you may want to do is even start with your budget, because this is where you really kind of put the meat on the bones. And this is where you know exactly what you're applying for and where that money's going. And it helps you to really think through your project. So we do look carefully at budgets. And when you're comparing, you know, various projects, one against another, this is a competitive program. You know, we want to make sure that you've really thought through the budget and that the funds are going in the right place. So I would just encourage you to, you know, carefully look at these things, talk them through with other people if you need to. All right, Ashley, I'm going to keep going because I want to make sure we have time for questions at the end. So you, again, for this budget, you're going to download a template, and there's steps right here next in the gray bar of how to do that. And that ensures that everybody who submits an application, their budget looks the same. And it really helps the reviewers to compare apples to apples instead of saying, oh, this person has a really well-organized budget. This one's got it on a scrap of paper. We can't make sense of it. You want your budget to be clear. And then there's, you know, some information about budget justification of, you know, how you came up with things. Did you make up a number, or do you actually have a quote from somebody about the project expenses? You can click on that. Yeah. So the municipal attachment is, this is important because we don't want somebody in a municipality to say, oh, I want to put in a dock. Great. And I'm going to put this application in, but nobody else on the team at the municipality knows about this project. So we want a letter of support from municipalities that just say, yeah, our you know, governing body understands the project. We support it. That way, if the project manager moves on a year from now, there's other people there that aren't saying like, oh, I never heard about this project. I didn't know. So we want to see a letter of support. Similarly, we want to know that there's ownership of the site, or if it's a nonprofit, that they have permission to use the site and there's an agreement in place there. So that's what this section is about. And we'll be happy to answer specific questions about this when we do the Q&A in a second. So that's what that section is. There's also nonprofit questions that if you're a nonprofit, again, do you have letter of support? What's the ownership of the site? Audited financial statements and things like that. And so we're, you know, again, we need to be sure that the money we're investing in projects is going to sites that can handle the project and can handle the budget and the money from A to Z of seeing it through. And every now and then there'll be an issue here where there's an organization that's applying, but they really aren't. They don't look like they're capable of getting from A to Z in a project. So these documents just kind of confirm that you're on solid ground and you're a good investment. So I think that's going to be it for me in explaining the application. And I'm going to turn it back to Ashley and Sasha, and I think we're maybe getting ready to go into a Q&A part of the meeting.
Yeah, so anyone that has questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We did have one person say, Christopher said it did not seem to allow you to paste in the location URL. That's correct, and that's because I did not put in an application title. So you are not able to fill in any of the additional information on your application. You can't answer any of the questions unless you name your application and you go through that first step. So that's that first start here tab at the beginning of both categories of each application. So just keep that in mind. It's also worth mentioning.
Can I make a note on that too? And I put this in the
Yeah.
chat, but if you've named your application, you may want to try using a keyboard shortcut. You can either right click and then hit paste, but sometimes applications don't do that. So we'll put this right in the instructions. We'll update it, but you can also do a Control V and the letter V, and that will paste into a space. So we'll just update that in case you need to use that.
Right. It's also worth mentioning too that if anyone would like to see the full application or to send it along to somebody else, you can download a PDF of the full application. On that start screen, there'll be an option that gives you a button to download. He said, Christopher also asks, in-kind equivalents, how to calculate, and can you give a couple examples? So that's a good question. So it's, I mean, so things that would be donated for an event, for example. So say you get a big donation of water bottles. I'm using that example because we recently had a paddling event and we had a big donation of water bottles. Use your best faith estimate of what the cost of those water bottles would be at a grocery store for a similar brand and a similar, package. If you're estimating the cost of volunteer time, for example, there is a link that you can use to input the value of volunteer time in your specific area. So that is made available to you as well so that you can calculate the actual estimated cost of your volunteer hours. So if you're estimating, it'll take about 40 hours of work, you'd input that into that calculator and it will tell you how much the value of that is. Rebecca says, we are a history museum looking to apply for an exhibit about the heritage and culture of the Erie Canal. A, does this qualify for the Tourism Infrastructure Amenities Grant? And B, would we need a letter of support for our own exhibit at the building we own? Jean or Sasha, do you guys want to take this one?
Yeah, Sasha, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. So a project like this would be eligible if you were talking about having like a program involving the exhibit. I would say not as much. And another question we would ask is like, is there a fee to get into your museum or historical society? That might be important to us because we want to have these grants go to offerings that are publicly available. What was the second question?
It was, would we need a letter of support for our own exhibit at the building we own?
You would want to get a letter of support potentially from the town supervisor or your local chamber of commerce, other interest groups or local electeds to help bolster the need for a project like that. So we want to see that it's supported by the community or leaders in your community.
Yeah, I was going to also say, Rebecca, you might consider a letter of support from someone at your local tourism office, whether it's a county tourism or something like that, to kind of showcase how the museum relates to tourism. And the draw that you want to make, because it's the bicentennial and you want to be able to showcase the canal heritage going forward and attract people to your area and to be a place that people go to find out more. So that's the kind of stuff you'd want to, I think, include in making the case for a tourism project.
Great. Eric asks, what will be allowed for valuable volunteer time as a match? So for the events category, we allow you to use volunteer time to make up your full match. So, you can only use volunteer time to meet your match. That's perfectly acceptable from the event standpoint. Staff time is not allowable. So if somebody is, being paid for their time spent on a specific project, that does not qualify. It's only volunteer hours or, services or time that is donated to the good of the event.
Eric, the same is true on the infrastructure side, where you can count volunteer hours as match. But you do want to take a look at the funding requirements. It's on the infrastructure side, it's on page 7 of the guidelines for the grant. There's a volunteer time calculator that you can use, but it's a good idea to make sure that you're tracking and that your volunteers are tracking, like the days that they're working, the hours, the who it is. Sometimes, if you're audited, if we are ever audited for a grant, people look at that stuff and they're like, well, did you check? How do you know that somebody's, spent 140 hours as their match? And then you want to be able to have some documentation to back that up. So there's some more information on the in-kind match in the grant guidelines that you can take a look at for that.
Okay, we have one more question from Mike, and he says, can you provide a contact point for future questions on eligibility? Mike, yes, absolutely. So the person you're going to contact for tourism infrastructure is Bob Radliff, who is our executive director that Jean mentioned is on jury duty today, so he couldn't be with us. His information is on the webpage, both on the main webpage and on the tourism infrastructure webpage. It's also listed in the program guide. If you have questions about events, you can contact me. My name is Ashley Quimby Simone, and my information is in all of the same places that I just mentioned, where Bob's information is listed. We do have a process for answering questions to avoid conflict of interest and to make it fair for all applicants. So if you have a question, please submit those by email to either Bob or myself, and then we will post those publicly to the website with the answer to your question. So we try and keep that page updated as frequently as possible. It'll be updated minimum once a week, but it's typically more frequent than that. It's usually, 2 or 3 times a week as I'm going in there and updating it. So I'll make sure that I send a link around to that page in a follow-up email after today's call with contact information for both Bob and myself. So that way, if you have any questions as you're going through the application or, for the future, you know who to contact.
Ashley, I'm going to just share my screen for 30 seconds and take us to that website so everybody can see where you're going. Okay, so you're going to go to the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor website and look under Find Resources. There's a tab for grants and funding, and it will take you right to this page. And so this is where the contact information is over here on the left-hand side. Here's some helpful documents also on the left. The link to the application is right there. There's more information, background on the tourism infrastructure and the event grants right in these upfront boxes. Goals of the programs are there, and here's where you can download the program guide right on this main page. And then here's a bunch of links to some of the resources that we've mentioned. So if you're looking for things that are event related, but you may want to just browse through that list just so you know what's there, what's available to your organization as you're applying. The other thing that I'll mention is that there's ideas for commemorating the bicentennial. We put together a document with just some suggestions of ways you might make your ordinary events, put a little bicentennial flair on them, or create a new event that has it's really about commemorating the bicentennial. So that's the page you're going to be going to off our website. And certainly if there are questions, you can look here. So Ashley, where are the answers to questions?
That blue button right there on the left-hand sidebar under contact
Oh,
us.
boom, great. Okay, thank you. I didn't see it. See, this is it's good. Okay, so the answers to submitted questions right here. And I'll just click on that. But we've had a couple of questions already, and so that's where that lives. Thank you. Okay.
Great. Well, that seemed to be our final question. I haven't seen any new ones come through. So we're wrapping up a little bit early for today's session, but I think that that's okay. I know that we've gone through this process a few times now, so if you've applied in the past, a lot of this sounds and looks very familiar to you. But we're really excited to be able to offer this program earlier in the year, or in the year prior to when all of these events and these projects will be starting to happen. And we're looking forward to the year ahead and to reading everybody's applications. So Jean, Sasha, do you want to say any words to close it out?
I just want to thank everyone for participating this morning. And yeah, again, reach out to Ashley, Bob, myself, or Jean if you have any questions, and we'll make sure to respond. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to just express my thanks too from the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor. We're excited to work with you in the year ahead on whether it's infrastructure or events. I am anticipating that we'll have a lot of applications this year. And maybe that's the only downside of this program is that we want to be able to fund it all, and it will be competitive. So I do want to encourage you to take the time to make your application as clear as you can, and reach out and we'll try to answer any questions that you have so that your application is as competitive as it can be. All right, thanks
Great.
so
Well,
much. We'll be in touch.
thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Okay.